Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Convos with Sazón with yours truly, Cata Mejía. With me today is Katherine Jimenez. She is a professional dancer, a choreographer, a dance educator, and a professor. Let's not forget it. ¿Cómo estás? Bienvenida.
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Claro, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It has been a long time coming. We have been in conversation, in passing, two ships passing in the night. And so I'm really happy to finally have you here.
Yeah.
Before we get to everything that you do as a professional, I want to get to know you first and really set that ground and that stage. So let's talk about your beginnings. Where did you grow up? What was that like? And how was dance and music present at an early age?
So New York City, born and raised.
Amazing.
Pero Afro-Latina. My parents are from the Dominican Republic, both immigrants. My mother came here as a child. My dad later in his teens. So they were able to also go to school here in New York City. I have an older sister, Katherine Jimenez, and we're both very much into the arts. And just as a family, as a whole, music, arts, it's always been present. A lot of my uncles would always play the la conga, los tambores, la guira, la maracas while we were at family gatherings. And my parents, they're wonderful dancers as well. I did come to the realization a couple years ago that I'm the first person in my family to really make a career out of the arts. But music, dance, arts, they've always been present and very closely tied to our culture.
That's beautiful. As a Colombiana, so fellow Latina, I can attest to the fact that music and dance is not only in our blood, but it's in the households that we were raised in, you know, whether it's casually as a meal is being cooked or something to set the ambiance. And I also actually learned how to dance seeing my parents and being in family gatherings. So I'm curious to know, you know, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? You know, was a professional dancer in the cards at that point, or did that come later in life?
So I started dancing very young. I began my formal training at 5 years old. So, you know, one day my dad came home, we were all in the house, and it, like you said, we were cleaning and cooking and music was playing and we were all dancing together. And he asked my sister and I, would y'all like to take a dance class this Saturday, salsa dance class this Saturday? And we were so excited. Yes, let's go. We went and took our first dance class. I remember it was a Saturday. And then the rest is history, as they say. I never stopped dancing. I started slowly. So I had my first performance about a month after dancing at that academy because that dance studio was also new. And so they were like friends of my father, and he's always been very into the arts. He's very creative. My mother as well, but my dad loves salsa. So salsa was always playing in the house, which, as if you know, for a lot of Dominicans, we listen to a lot of merengue and bachata, and traditionally that's what would be playing at home, but he's all about salsa. So I know all about La Fania, All Stars, and all of that NY Style Mambo history from a very young age. And he was able to live it, right? And so it's very special to understand that now. I don't think that at 5 years old I knew this is going to be what I'll do for the rest of my life, but that passion was always there. And as I continued to train, I remember even that first performance, right? They were like, tú eres muy chiquita, you're too little, like you're not gonna be able to perform on stage. And I couldn't stop rehearsing on the side. Like I was like, I need to do this. Until he was like, if I put you on stage, will you dance? I'm like, of course I'll dance. And that was my debut performance. So después de eso, entrenando siempre, bailando siempre, anywhere I could, ahí estaba yo. Y todavía, it's a little different now, pero todavía. I love to dance, and I feel very blessed that this is my career.
That's beautiful. So you started at that dance school at a young age. What was the progression like in your training after that? Because I know that at some point the Ailey Academy came into your world. So let's talk about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started dancing salsa. We were training, and someone mentioned to my father the Alvin Ailey American Dance Institution. And they were like, you need to get her into some, you know, formal training, as they say, of these more like classical dance techniques. And so without having any prior training in ballet or jazz or tap, I went and auditioned for the Ailey School. and the Ailey School's junior division, like the pre-professional division that they have. I had maybe learned plie, tendu, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna, put on my leotard, my tights, and go in and audition. And I did. The wonderful thing about going into audition at Ailey is there's always a demonstrator. They go over the exercises, and I think it's more about coordination at that age, and how quickly you're able to pick up some of the movements. And so I went through their audition process and I got accepted. And from that point on, I then moved up in levels every single year. So the way that their school structure works is that first year when you get accepted, you take 2 different dance techniques. And so different from, let's say, a dance studio that is only teaching you one technique, the idea at Alvin Ailey is that you train in multiple styles so that you're able to move your body in different ways. So, for example, my first year training at the Ailey School was ballet and West African. So standing very tall and then getting down low and feeling the drums, which already came naturally because of that Afro-Latin dance technique that I was training in simultaneously. But they were different. And they complemented each other. So I went on to train at the Ailey School for about 15 years. Every year, a little bit more intense, a different dance technique. So ballet and tap, ballet and flamenco, ballet and Horton, which is a modern dance technique, ballet and Graham, until I was in my final year of high school, where now you're training every day, pretty much. I think Sunday was like our rest day, but I'm doing my Afro-Latin stuff still. So I'm still dancing 7 days a week at that point, about 9 hours a day.
Wow. At what age did you join the Alvin Ailey Institute?
I think I was about 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, o sea, pasó rápido,
Súper
debut
rápido.
at 5, 6 professional or pre-professional training. And then at what point in those 15 years did you realize, wow, like I could actually make a career out of this? As you were surrounded by more professional dancers, did that maybe click as a more feasible path for you?
Absolutely. So my sister and I, a couple years later, we ventured out and we started to train with a NY Style Mambo mentor. During that time, he suggested that we have our own group. So my dad named us La Combinación Perfecta, like the, Fania All-Stars group. And Raf Mercado was someone that we met on our journey. I was able to perform at the United Palace with Tito Vega, not Tito Puente, Tito Vega, todavía no. Tito Vega, Marvin Santiago, and so it was a concert of salseros, and he mentioned, I have these 2 girls, and to me, they're the perfect combination because they bring different elements. My sister, she's blanquita, like you, and I'm a little tan, so he's like, they complement each other, and I want to name them La Combinación Perfecta, so he gave us his blessing. He's like, absolutely, I love to see it, and we started to tour at a young age.
Wow.
So with this group now, we were, I would dare to say, if not the first, one of the first female duets, also children, and we were invited all over the world to perform in the adult show. So I think that for me was when it clicked, because now we have all of these iconic pioneers of this dance technique in this community, and they are motivating us to continue training and to continue dancing and enjoy the process.
Wow, impresionante, honestly. Did you ever feel throughout your journey, especially as you were younger, that you had to perform from a point of view of obligation? Was there ever a near experience where the passion y el gusto que le tenías at sometimes felt like a chore?
100% no.
Oh, good. Okay,
100% no. Yeah, it's amazing, and I think sometimes now I have to remind myself it is a job, right? And it is the career that I've built. But no, it's so true what they say, that when you do what you love, you do not work a day in your life. Because I am very blessed. And I feel grateful more than anything to be able to move my body in that way, to express myself in that way. Y cuando era muy niña, era muy tímida. I was very shy. So if anything, for me, that was the outlet. That was my way of expressing myself and connecting with others, and specifically being on stage. that for me, it's like I was able to just be whoever I wanted, transform. And so I had this event where my dad, this was before we got invited back to the United Palace, he threw me on stage during the concert. So security went crazy, and they're like, you know, we hadn't signed anything, and tal vez 6 o 7 años, I think like 6. He's like, will you dance? Yes. Me tiró. I start dancing on stage. Everyone goes crazy. Like, you can imagine, this is filled with thousands of people. And so I think those are those core memories that I didn't know it at the time. But as I look back now and reflect, I think 25 years almost of this career, I can recognize that this is what I was born to do, for sure.
Wow. You know, you start mentioning, obviously, your upbringing and how core it is to everything that you've done, and also the spaces in which you were able to be in, continue to be in. Did you ever feel like a lack of representation? Being the first or one of the first to do what you all were doing was something that went hand in hand with your experiences, whether that was noticing that there weren't that many people that were doing what you all did, or that you maybe had to work a little bit harder than those around you or your peers. Talk about that.
Yeah, we would constantly hear, you guys need to get them partners. Why don't they have partners as girls? 2 girls dancing together, young, you know? And so I don't think it was said with like a negative connotation or in that way at all, and that's not how we interpreted it. But yes, we were paving the way so that it could become the norm. And today it brings me joy to see how many female solo artists there are. And again, along with the 2 of us, there were so many others, right? Like professional dancers that were also working really hard to make that a possibility, and still to this day. But it does bring me great joy to know that como que pusimos un granito de arena. Yes. We were also a part of that legacy. And even at Alvin Ailey, at the Ailey School, growing up, all of these different Afro-Latin dance techniques that are a part of the Ailey extension today, and that I've been able to share with like the PPAS program, which is the high school that I went to that has an affiliation with Ailey, they weren't a part of the curriculum when I was a student. And so Alvin Ailey has so many rich styles and cultures for you to learn from. There's a lot of representation at its core. But 10 years ago, I became the first mambo instructor for their institution. And through workshops, performances, we implemented New York Style Mambo, or Salsa on 2. I brought in some pachanga workshops, cha-cha-cha and boogaloo. So yes, definitely there was a lack of representation. And even this past year, there was like an Afro-Caribbean choreography that the Ailey company presented. So me hace muy feliz ver que eso es parte ahora de la cultura. Y como mencioné, that I also was able to kind of see that there was something there. And in a dance institution that I consider my home. I'm still an instructor there, so I consider that my home. Sometimes I joke that I live there, and at home I just go to rest my head. So es para mí un placer to be able to bring something that's very closely tied to my culture, to our culture and our people, and bring a little more awareness just about the cultural roots as well as the dance technique. Because although, yes, it was something that was always present at our home and, you know, we grew up with that, I did also train very hard to be able to accurately represent the dance techniques.
You should be so proud. Qué orgullo de verdad. Speaking of being the first New York Style Mambo instructor at Ailey, you know, what did that signify for you? Was that a reaffirmation of all the hard work you had done up until that point? And then did that also add to the notion of, okay, llegué hasta este punto, let's go for more? Tell me about that.
Yeah, for a while there, I'm sure, as you know, when you're in it, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, and so I think those aha moments come later.
Of course.
For me. I look back and I go, yes, now 10 years, right? And so it's beautiful that we're celebrating that this year and that we have fun workshops, and a lot of my students have been training with me 8, 9, 10 years. So that's something that's very special. Pero en el momento, I am very disciplined and I work really hard. So I don't think there's ever a moment for me where I'm like, I did it. You know, I'm always like, vamos por más.
Yes.
Like, what now?
Of
And what's the next
course,
step?
of
And I'm
course.
actually working on the opposite side of that, right? Like, how do you enjoy the hard work, and how do you become as present as possible? And so I think that's something that I'm currently working on, graduating from NYU, getting my master's, becoming a professor there, right? Like, now as I see that all of these things have, like, I've been able to manifest them y con la gracia de Dios, de Papá
And
Dios.
your hard work, and your hard work.
Yeah.
We left off at high school.
Sí.
So what happened between high school and starting as an instructor at the Alvin Ailey School? And you just mentioned NYU. I'm a fellow alumna from there as well. So talk about that. Let's fill in those gaps.
Sí, claro. So I went on to tour for maybe like a year and a half, just full time. Every time I travel, I always travel with my parents. So I get asked the question, they're like, is that your bodyguard? Is that your dance partner? So I'm like, yes to all of it. Yes to all of it. But yes, I always travel with my parents, and we had the pleasure of just touring all over the world. At that moment, I really established my solo career. I did my undergrad in like business and marketing. And so simultaneously, while I was in school, I was also building up my own business.
Nice.
I have a website, kjon2.com.
I know. We're going to get to that.
We'll get to that later. We'll get to that later. Pero en ese momento, I was really like establishing that and coming up with what that would look like, right? I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did. It was more so like, what would that look like if that was something that I added on? And so that's really when I shifted a little bit more into the dance education aspect of it. So I started teaching a little bit more, definitely performing as well, but that's when the switch started to occur.
Okay. Beautiful. I love that. And there's still so much to talk about. We can dive into KJ on too, actually, because I know that one of the things that inspired it was your mission to make dance accessible to all. So what was the inspiration for that? Did you experience a hardship in accessibility, or did you know of others that had the talent but maybe didn't have the resources or didn't have the knowledge to be able to fully take that talent to the level that it deserved to be at?
Absolutely. Yes to all of it. And I launched that website or that streaming platform during the pandemic. And so on top of everything that you mentioned, there was that idea of, I just want this to be something that we can all do. We know, that how like traumatizing in a way that experience was for all of us. And so this was my way of like giving back to the community and keeping some of that joy for my students, for anyone that was interested, but also for myself. Again, workaholic a little bit, right? And so we started off with like one class a week where I was teaching on Zoom, like most instructors did. And then I started
that's tough.
It was tough.
The disconnect with the music, and this is not about me, but I'm a Zumba instructor, and I taught Zumba classes over Zoom.
So
and I'm like, do you guys hear the music? Is it lagging? No, we're going this way. We're going that way. Like, truly, the technical difficulties and figuring that out, even though you had obviously the best intentions, and I'm sure you planned it out, that is very real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is hard. We need better. So I started to work on that, on the technological side of it.
Beautiful.
Another hurdle to get over.
Sure.
Becoming technologically savvy. Pero sí, lo pudimos lograr, a lot of hard work. And so then once we had launched the streaming platform, I was teaching every day. There were live classes. There were classes that you could log back into. You could watch the classes that had aired, all of these different dance techniques. And so along with that, I was also working with a couple different institutions, and it was for students that maybe didn't have the resources, right? Or that school was a way for them to escape some of the or like that consistency that they needed, and so these classes were also offered for them, for their parents, for their siblings. It was a moment where they could either disconnect and log into, or a place for the families to jump into this session together and connect
awesome.
With us.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into the educator part of your journey, because I think it takes a lot to be on that side of things. A lot of patience, a lot of passion, truly a desire to give back. And I want to know where that stems from. You mentioned when you were auditioning for Ailey, there was someone there who took the time to kind of show you the steps. So let's talk about that. Who were your early mentors? And then also who took the time to serve as your educator enough for then you to be like, let me take this now and pay it forward to the future generations?
Oof. I have so many amazing people that I could thank. Just for being there with me, right? Lydia, my first female instructor, Osmar Perrones, Eddie Torres, my two main dance instructors in NY Style Mambo, pioneers that encouraged me to be the strong dancer that I am today, and also to teach me footwork, right? And so that's a lot of what I teach today. We call it open work in Latin dance technique, or shines. And they were my mentors growing up, for sure, along with my parents. They've been rooting for me every step of the way. And I believe that I can say with certainty that for a lot of immigrant families, right, or Latino families, going into the arts has not always been something that is really encouraged, right? So to have them by my side and consistently cheering me on and present for anything that I did and still do to this day. Like I come home and I'm like, okay, I have a choreography, and they're like, put it on the TV, let's watch it, like let's stop everything we're doing. So that's really special for me that they're always encouraging me. Same with the dance education, tapping into that as a master's program. At that moment, I had realized that this was something that I wanted to do full time. And so we had, a family discussion, and I mentioned to them, and they were like, dale, go for it. You can do it. We're here and we believe in you. And absolutely, that definitely sounds like it aligns perfectly with your path. And so my mentor that I just have to thank, Deborah Damast. She is the director for the program at NYU. She's the director for the dance education program. And from the moment we met, she's like, we don't have anyone here that's ever taught or studied NY Style Mambo in that way, from the moment I interviewed to become a part of the master's program. And so even as a student, I was teaching a lot of workshops, and I think yo pienso que lo tiempo de Dios son perfectos.
Amen.
So God's timing is perfect. And during my studies there, I had wonderful colleagues that were cheering me on and you are going to become a professor here. You're going to become a professor here, just speaking life into the things that I do. And so the transition, it wasn't harsh. It was a smooth transition, right? We encourage in dance, smooth transitions. And that's how a lot of the things that have happened in my life, that's really how they feel.
Beautiful. We mentioned potential hardships earlier on, when we were talking about accessibility. You've shared some beautiful things about your journey, and I think that's lovely, but I'm sure that your journey hasn't been perfect and it hasn't always been easy. So let's talk about that side of things that people may not know to think about, or they may not know that it takes all of the work that it does to get to where you are today. So let's do it justice. Tell me more candidly about sacrifices that you and your family have had to make, maybe challenges that you've faced or continue to face because of the industry that you're in.
Absolutely. It's hard to be a professional dancer, and I'm sure with so many things in the arts, but I'll just talk about my expertise, right? To be a professional dancer, now educator, there's so many things you have to sacrifice, right? And I started performing, touring, trabajando, como quien dice, from a very young age. And so sometimes that means not showing up to friends' birthdays or events or parties, right? Sometimes that means early nights because you are using your body or standing on your feet for most of the day. Now that I teach mostly, right, and I'm teaching maybe from 8 in the morning to sometimes 8 at night or 9 p.m., I'm talking most of the day along with moving my body. So that means some quiet time to recharge on my own, right? Naturally, I'm a little introverted. And so having all of these different roles where they ask me to be extroverted, which I love and really enjoy, but I do need that downtime as well. So yeah, it is a lot of hard work. And I do think that if there's something that you want, right? If nothing else from this interview, but if there's something that you want, you have to prioritize. And that's something that I learned very early on and that I continue to have those conversations with myself. ¿Cuáles son las prioridades, right? I read this book one time. It said, if everything is a priority, then technically nothing is a priority.
Yes.
So prioritizing, I think, is definitely one of those things that is so important if you are looking to achieve something.
When it comes to everything that it takes to be a professional dancer and an educator and a choreographer, basically everything that you do, were all of those factors that you had to consider easily, offered up, or was that something that you kind of learned with time? And what I mean by that is the fact that you need to rest, the fact that the nutrition aspect, I'm sure, is very important, the fact that, yes, of course, it's really important to train, but maybe overtraining is not that great thing either,
Right.
So talk about all of that. Were those things that when you started, there were people who told you, hey, heads up, look for this, this, and this, or keep an eye out? Or was it a combination of, yes, that, but also you learning for yourself?
There's definitely a combination of the two. And really, that's why I mention my parents a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely my father, mommy as well. I love you, mommy. but my dad, he's like, he's definitely the person that's like pushing me and also reminding me, you need to rest, you need to don't overwork yourself, or like push a little harder, you can do a little this. So I would say he's definitely my number one cheerleader and mentor, and we work very closely on all of the projects that I put together. I'm always looking for his input, and all of my family as well. So we're very like close knit, right? And somos muy cercanos y trabajamos juntos. We're always like checking in with each other. Y creo que para mí eso es lo más importante.
Claro que sí. Actually, now that you mention it, the first time that I saw you on stage, and it was like my introduction to you and your work, was at a Whitney event. And if I'm not mistaken, your dad was there, actually. He either introduced you or he said some words or he was on the sidelines. And as a dancer myself, not professional by any means, but it's always been a passion of mine, and I performed at a young age. That really does remind me of how much of an impact and difference it makes for those closest to you to be present in every sense of the word. I, similarly to what you were saying, whenever I had dance recitals or performances, it was never a question whether or not my parents were going to be in the crowd, and like coordinábamos, como que voy a estar a la izquierda del escenario, and it was always like we checked in, and maybe that was something that didn't, wasn't present to everybody else, but I needed that connection. So that's beautiful, that you share that to a different level, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm also curious to know, how your style has evolved, especially when you were training early days and you had to do ballet and other styles. How have you taken aspects of all of the styles that you've been exposed to and trained in and formed your own?
That's a good question. For a very, very long time, and I would argue for most of my career, that has been my goal. How do I take all of these different ingredients, so to speak, and put them together in my own way? All of the movements have been created, right? Like people just move naturally, and that's a part of the accessibility, right? That sometimes people are like, I'm not a dancer at all, but just you tapping your foot, just you doing a little snap, a little sway side to side, that's you dancing, right? And your body asks for it. It's good for you. And so, yeah, for me, it was very important to create my own style and stay true to a lot of the different techniques. So that's something that I noticed that I was very clear about. Sometimes those lines get blurred, and for me, it wasn't done in the best way, only because the technique still has to be accurately represented. So that was something that for me, that was important for me. That although I was adding in elements from these different dance techniques where I trained, you could, if you were a mambo dancer, you could clearly see that the technique was on point. If you were a ballet dancer, you could clearly see that I had trained in ballet, right, or on point. Same thing for modern dance, that you could see that. And that's what I think took the longest time is figuring out when to weave in and out of one. But I started choreographing very young. I think I choreographed my first official piece for my sister and I maybe when I was about 11. And we performed it in London. And ever since then, I was very aware that it was something that I liked. I would watch videos and practice learning from the videos. Then I would put them together in my own way. Freestyle was a big thing for me. So even till this day in my room, I have like a studio section. So I have like a little at-home studio.
Beautiful.
I don't freestyle as much as I used to, right? Your relationship, I feel, it evolves with time, como cualquier otra. But yeah, when I was in my teens and definitely my early 20s, freestyle was something that I was doing consistently. And so I would record a lot of that material and play around with mixing those styles in my own way, both in my classes and in my choreographies. So a lot of my choreographies, if you pull them up on YouTube, you can see where that switch happens.
Oh, we will. We will be doing some more research after. You mentioned earlier how the stage is such a special place for you because it's one of the few spaces in which you can fully be yourself, you know, and kind of be out of your shell and express yourself. So talk about that transition and how you get in the zone while simultaneously being present with the choreography, with the audience, and also balancing, you know, that cultural aspect that you were talking about and the thoughtfulness behind being respectful to the style while also weaving your own and the emotions, I'm sure, that come with it at the same time.
Claro. I call it nervous-sided. You're nervous and you're excited.
I love that.
They live in the same chakra, right? And so even to my students, I'm like, it's normal to be nervous. And a lot of times that just means that you're doing something that brings you a little bit of fear or excitement, which is good. It's good to try new things. And so I respect the stage and I love performing. And I encourage my dancers to do that as well. This is your moment, like Beyonce says, turn on that alter ego. And This is your moment to be anyone that you want to be. And by the time you go to the stage, if you respect it, then you've already put in the hard work, right? Those long hours of training, those long hours of rehearsing that choreography and makeup and hair and costume and shoes and bling bling, right? All the bedazzles. You've already done that part. So then ties in the aspect of being present, right? If you trust that you've put in the hard work and that you had that discipline and that, for me, the creation process or working with my students, if all of that is true, then the trust needs to kick in. And there's a moment where you just need to let it go, right? You need to let the dancers just interpret the movement in their own way. And that's something that's true for me in any class that I teach. You will constantly hear me say, be yourself, explore with your own movement, bring your own personality, because ultimately that's what dance is about, right? And earlier you mentioned you didn't continue maybe with dance, but dance was a part of your life growing up, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, I'm like, if you've been bitten by that dance bug, it's with you forever, you know, like almost like riding a bike. When the music comes on, it clicks and you go back into it. And the more that I have like evolved and grown into who I am as an individual, the more I see that my movement matures as well. And I can then flow even nicer, you know, in that new language that I speak, which is all these different elements that I grew up training in.
What a beautiful way of putting it. Alongside evolution, I think, comes inspiration. So how do you continue to draw inspiration from the world around you? And also, what does inspire you? You know, when you are tackling a new choreography or something to teach your students or even something just for yourself, you know, when do you know I have to pursue this? And then also, when do you know what to actually execute on?
That's a good one. The improvisation is something that has helped me. That's my personal way of like, it's almost like a diary or like a journal. Yeah. And so that's why somewhere along the journey, I realized you need to record this stuff because you don't always remember, right? When you're just present and you're just feeling the music. And so I guess that brings me to the next point, which is music is number one for me. For some people, right, which there's nothing wrong with it. And it also depends on what dance technique or how you go about movement. But for me, music is number one, especially because my joy and what I enjoy are these dances that are a part of the African diaspora. Mm-hmm. So music and dance, they are one. They're not these two separate entities. So picking the song is number one. And if I'm even driving and I hear a song, I'm like, oh, need to add that to like my playlist of, you know, just improvising later in the afternoon or later in the week. So there was a time que sí, ahí mismo, pum, me paraba y bailaba. Pero no, hoy en día es como que I schedule it a little bit more. And when I have those free moments, that's why they're so sacred to me. And I think that also goes hand in hand with your previous question of like that learning of when to prioritize certain things. Then you understand that like this is something that is necessary, right? It's yes, 5 minutes of journaling won't like change everything, but it could, right? And it doesn't feel that way. So for me, dancing is that, right? And although it's something that I'm doing all day long, every single day, each como que faceta, each phase of it is a little bit different. And so that idea of just improvising, that's my moment to play around and find that inspiration, as well as going out and watching a lot of different shows. Anytime I see something, you'll just see me taking notes. I'm sure some people are like, she's on her phone. I'm taking notes because I need to like remember these ideas, and they come at at any time, right? Like I'll see a tree moving and I'm like, I have an idea. Entonces lo escribo ahí, and that way I don't forget.
That's beautiful. That's like having un radar siempre como que tu, 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 tu. I can relate to that. You know, for the podcast, I'm always on the lookout of, that's an interesting story. That person would be good, you know, so I can relate to that in a different sense. You know, you mentioned the balance of prioritization and discipline, but then also working on trying to be present. Let's talk about where pressure comes into all of this and balance of giving yourself grace while simultaneously knowing when it is time to buckle down and like really focus. Have you struggled with that at any point of maybe feeling like all of your hard work is still not enough and maybe getting to the point of potentially overworking yourself, and then on the flip side struggling with taking a break when your body needs it?
What is a break? No se sabe. That is something that I am currently working on all the time. That's a big word for me, balance. I love saying that word, and it's so important in dance, right? Like how you find that balance, how you can pull on one end and the other. And so a lot of those metaphors, I like translate them into my life as well. So I'm constantly trying to find that balance of those things that are for me, like you said, the nutrition, right? The training that is so that I can continue to move my body in that way, taking classes for me, watching shows, spending time with my family, working. I work in 3 different institutions, right? Along with like my own personal things that I do as well. So I'm constantly trying to find that balance, and I think something that has really helped me recently is understanding that not all of it has to happen all of the time. So, me explico. Es como que yo pensaba en un momento, these are all the things I need to do. I need to find time for all of it in one. How do I do it in one day? How do I do it in 1 week? And lately I've been playing with the idea with, yes, it's wonderful, for example, to do yoga in the morning, but maybe that just happens 1 day out of the week, right? And then you see how that affects the rest of your schedule. And so I think that ties into like the prioritizing, right? Like once I realize maybe like Pilates is really helping me, okay, then how do I adjust so that becomes maybe 3-4 times a week? And then rest is a part of that. But it's a constant like tug of war, like a push and pull. Absolutely. That is happening every day for me personally. But every week I try to tackle it like, okay, what are we doing this week? And then I narrow it down even further. What are we doing today? And then what are we doing right now? Like reeling myself back in so that I can really take in all of that, those different things that happen in just one day.
That's a really great way of putting it. Like almost like you see all of these things on a table and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this and this now, and then I'm going to kind of switch it around. Prioritization is a big theme about many of the things that we've talked about. The dance industry specifically has a reputation of being very cutthroat. You know, the arts in general, but dance in particular. And so I'm curious to know if you've ever felt the impact of competition. And as a result, comparison. You know, you mentioned that you started off with your sister and then you kind of broke off to do your own thing, but still remain in group settings in some way, shape, or form. So how have you dealt with comparison? And then also based on your experiences, how have you instilled teachings in your students about how to treat environments like that?
Being cutthroat and comparison, as you said, definitely a part of the dance community. I would argue that I haven't personally felt those as much, only because I am harder on myself, I think, than anyone else. And so then when you are, como dice mi papá, como los caballos, right? Like when you are looking straight forward and only comparing and quote unquote judging yourself based off of your own experiences and how you show up to do the work, then it doesn't leave me personally enough time to look to the sides, and compare myself, quote unquote, to anyone else or feel that pressure. I can honestly say that any audition I showed up to, I did the best that I could. And most of the time, I got the role, or I got the job, or I was a part of that program, or, you know. So I think I've been very fortunate. But to your earlier point, I also put in the work. And so then at that moment, when I show up, there's that level of trust in myself and that, like, organic feeling of my own movement, of staying true to who I am as an individual and what I bring to the table. All of these different things that, one, I've worked for, and two, that are a part of who I am, that I am confident in them, and it doesn't necessarily give me the room or make me want to even just look over to the side. I am really one of those people. I'm like cheering everyone on. I'm like, yes, I love that. And now my turn. Here we go. Cuando yo llegue, agárrate. Pero, you know, but in a like a fun, competitive kind of way.
Of course.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, I was curious to dive deeper into the venues that you have performed at. You know, you mentioned United Palace. I know that Radio City Music Hall and Lincoln Center are also in that mix. So what have those milestones symbolized for you? You know, to some people, it might just be another place, but these are truly iconic in the arts and in New York City. So being a native New Yorker, being so involved in the arts, what have those moments meant for you?
Just pivotal moments for me. Like you mentioned, as a New Yorker, staples of New York City, right? And in all these different communities, United Palace, Washington Heights, right? Manhattan, Lincoln Center, Radio City Music Hall. These are places that have really been showcasing the arts, and so for decades now. So to be one of the artists that is invited to perform at these venues, I think it becomes a testament to I'm on the correct path. I'm following, this light that I don't necessarily know where it's leading me, but I believe that I just need to continue to step in that way, because it's almost like a reassurance, like, oh, wow, okay, yes, like a little reset before going back to the hard work.
Beautiful. Speaking of reassurance and continuing the path, I know that you were in the Heights.
Yes.
So talk about that experience. You know, how did that come about? Again, being a New Yorker of Dominican descent, like, there are so many overlaps and intentionality in the work that you do and the things that you've chosen to pursue, that I'm also a believer of. When you put in the work, you attract what you're seeking for and more, you know, and I believe this could be one of those opportunities. So tell me about that.
A friend of mine said, you'd be perfect for this. You need to go audition. And so I reached out to them, and they were like, yeah, we're hosting auditions on my birthday, actually. So
When's
they're
your
like
birthday?
January 24th.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad is 3 days before mine. So January 21st. I believe the first one was on his. So on his birthday, I received prior to that, but they say it's on his birthday. Here's the audition date. You have to come in, bro. So preparo todo. My headshot. We show up early. And it was a couple hours. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that first audition was like freestyling. I saw some familiar faces. They have us just kind of give an overview of our relationship and our trajectory in the dance community. So it was very fun. Always a little nerve-wracking, but like I said, that comes with the territory. You know, you're in the room, and then now what you do with that's up to you. That's how I look at it. And I'm a work in progress too, right? So I think mindset is one, and then how you translate that is the second part of that. But it was an amazing experience. Then I got a call back. On that day, they asked us to first learn a choreography, maybe like one or two. So a lot of dancing on that second day. My feet were cramping y toda la cosa, pero todo bien. Then they asked us to partner up with someone, some dancers that were professionals in other genres or other dance styles. And so my partner was like, I do not know not even a little bit of salsa. I was like, I got you. I'm an instructor. We're going to learn it right now. So nos pusimos ahí. We started to learn the choreography. Después así mismo le dije, well, today's my birthday, actually. We auditioned, and then they reached out to us. Unfortunately, during that time, I was finishing up my undergrad. And so tuve que poner una balanza. And again, like you said, that theme of prioritizing, right? And so it was a wonderful experience, and I was so blessed and feel so blessed to have been a part of it. But that did limit it a little bit. And so I'm grateful that I was still able to be a part of it and have that my little piece of representation in there. And I was able to participate in one of the scenes where there was minimal choreography. They asked us to freestyle. And so it was beautiful being on set, seeing Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Me imagino.
Oh my gosh, I've seen the movie 1,000 times. And same, I think to see all of my colleagues showing up and really like showing the accuracy of our dance technique. There are so many films, and I talk about that part with my students as well, right? That are staples in our community, and I won't mention them here, okay? Me lo voy a reservar. But there are so many where, you know, they say mambo, and it's not actually mambo, right? Or they say something else, and it's a different dance technique. And so to highlight this film specifically, the beauty was that all of the choreographers and all of the dancers that were included in the project, myself as well, we did it justice. We really showed up, and it's one of the first films that I can say they had so much different dance techniques, but you can see that it's accurately represented. And I think that that's really special. And hopefully this is just the beginning of what that starts to look like on film.
Yeah, and that goes to show the continued importance of authenticity, right? And really putting in the work and the research. And if you have the resources, especially for a film like one of these, you know, to find the people that actually know and will be representative both in style and otherwise. Yep. I want to talk about the versatility of your work. You know, we've talked about you just being in a film. We've talked about you being in a classroom setting, on the stage. Where else, in addition to around the globe, because you mentioned London not too long ago as well, where else has your craft taken you that we may not have already spoken about?
One of the most iconic trips that I've taken has been to China. So we got invited to go out and perform in China, and I didn't know too much about the culture, and although we've been touring, you know, all of my life, this was special because it's very different from my culture, and or from what we experience here in New York City, and to arrive there and just see how welcoming they were and how much the people just enjoy dancing and music. I mean, hands down, one of the events where I was blown away. We were dancing every night till 5, 6 in the morning. People were up by 7 a.m. I was like, no, aquí no se duerme. Aquí se vino a bailar solamente. But it was a beautiful experience, just to, you know, be so like deep into their culture, and also to see how welcoming they were of ours as well. So just one of the beautiful, I guess, like moments where you really get to see that cultural exchange ultimately.
That's awesome, because as you were talking about that, I thought about, you know, those videos that you see on the internet of Asian-based musical groups singing salsa or dancing salsa. And like you mentioned, that cultural exchange, I'm sure it's beautiful to witness it for yourself and to experience it firsthand. But it really does go to show that music and dance, in my opinion, they transcend barriers. They transcend language differences, cultural differences. And I think that is really important, you know, to continue to talk about, because when it comes to reducing budget, whether it's at an educational level, at a countrywide level, or whatever the case may be, the arts tend to be the first that are slashed. And I don't think they get enough credit for how much they teach others, how much they serve as community builders and uplifters. And it teaches more than just movement, you know, and I'm sure you can, you know, speak even more to that. Along those lines, you mentioned how, you were hoping that the advances that you've seen thus far and that you've been a part of are just the beginning. So what would you say needs to happen, in order to fill that gap of continuing to uplift Latin style dances that are so deeply culturally and historically rooted that really require authentic representation in every sense of the word?
Lo que está pasando ahora. And we're living in a wonderful time where we are now welcome and accepted into more spaces, right? A lot of Latinas, Latinos, we are getting those master's degrees and we are able to get into academia a little bit more. Whether you have the masters or not, right? In those spaces, we're now opening the door so that dancers that are professionals in their field can come in and share their knowledge with the generations that are coming up. And so I think this generation really, like, we are the ones making the difference. Those that came before us, they kind of laid down the groundwork. And this is our contribution where let's say that's very closely tied to like what I feel my purpose is, right? For the past decade at least, I've really been focusing on how we can implement this idea of like Afro-Latin, Afro-Caribbean culture, the accuracy of it, these different dance techniques, the music, how we can bring that into spaces where typically it was ballet, modern, and jazz, and maybe tap, right? And although those are still, I think, essential things that we don't need to take out of the curriculum, I do think that there is space to also implement all of these other dance techniques. And so I think it's happening right now, right? Like even me being at NYU and teaching that Afro-Caribbean dance course is already a step forward. Me being at Alvin Ailey is already a step forward. Us having the film of In the Heights. And so creo que en pedacitos, it's already happening right in front of our eyes.
I love that. Where do you hope all of this work takes you as an individual, but also our community too? What would you love to be able to see and say, this is why I put in the work that I did, and on the shoulders of those who came before you, on the foundation that was laid out by previous generations as well?
My dream, I think, would be that, or at least one of them, right? I have a couple, but one of my dreams would be, to answer your question, that it's not that we are blind to the fact that we have differences, but more that we celebrate those differences, right? Especially where we are today with our government and our country, that we don't penalize each other and we don't como que menospreciar otra persona because of how they look or because of the color of their skin or because of where they come from. I would love, that would be my dream, that, like you said, we use the arts as a form of connection and education, right? I'll teach you about my culture, you teach me about yours, and there's this cultural exchange in any space that we arrive to, right? And with this like uproar of ChatGPT and AI and all these things, right? Technology has been evolving over the past couple years. So I understand that that's maybe like a natural course of the way that it works. But then for me, right, the arts is the answer, because that is where a machine can't come in and, teach you a dance with passion and talk to you about, right? That is where the human experience comes in. And so that would be my dream, that we pivot a little bit more, whether it's in a school setting, anywhere else, and that we really tap into the arts of each one of our community, and then we have that culture exchange, but in celebration of one another.
I love that, in celebration. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, you've done so much up until now, right? And I know that you're working on being present, and I hope we did a good amount of that. But I would like to talk about the future. What is it that you're working towards? Is there something that maybe you have up your sleeve, an inside scoop, an exclusive that you want to share with us? You also mentioned having other dreams, so talk about that. How are you working towards those?
Yes, I am currently working on them.
I love that. I have no doubt.
Pero, nothing that I can share too much just yet. Okay, so
It's
coming
okay.
soon, coming soon.
Okay.
We'll meet again, and then I'll give you
Of course,
all the
I would love
scoops.
that.
But I have a performance workshop that I put together every year. So again, this will be the celebration of a decade at the Ailey Extension as an instructor there. And so that's coming soon. It's like an 8-week performance workshop. You sign up, you train with me, and then you get to perform on stage. But in reference to things outside of the arts or things that are connected to that, I'm definitely still exploring some things, and they will be out soon. Just to give you a little hint,
Yes, please.
I created my first single a couple years ago. It's called Mantequilla by Katherine Jimenez. You can search it up on all streaming platforms. And so I made that track not in the hopes of now shifting into a career in music in that way, right, in singing or songwriting, but more so it can be like an add-on to the things that I already create. So during that time, I was doing a lot of different interviews, Telemundo, Fox One, and right, all that good stuff. And we would constantly have to ask for the copyrights of music, or else we'd get that elevator music salsa. Y no estamos en eso.
Oh my gosh. I have a personal story with that, which I'll tell you off camera. So I know the struggle.
So I was like, no. This just means that this is an opportunity for me to, explore my artistry in a different way. And so it was really fun, and it was a learning process. But yes, I put out my first single called Mantequilla. And so we got that along with some other things in the works.
That's exciting. To close this out, I mean, I could ask you so many more questions. You are so interesting. And I truly, as someone who loves dance myself, I'm just so curious. But to close this out, I would love to ask you, there are so many people out there who they're like, oh, no sé bailar, no sé cómo, but you see them moving in their seats, and maybe with a little liquid courage, they get on the dance floor. But what do you have to say to people like that maybe have the misconception of they had to be formally trained or they had to be raised with music in order to get the confidence to follow the rhythm, and be on the dance floor if that's something that they want?
One of my mentors says, if I get the quote correct, no es el que mejor baile, es el que más se lo disfrute. So one, enjoy yourself, right? This idea that people are judging us, a lot of times it's in our own heads. And again, so much is happening in the world, so much happens in our own lives that people are not that worried about you, right? Like we are, and we love you, but also be yourself, right? Like have a good time. And even if they are, the main focus I think should be that it is a celebration of you being able to move your body. And sometimes that's how I get myself right to the gym or to these classes when I don't want to go, or if I feel a little bit intimidated, right? This is a celebration that I'm able to move my body in this way. And I had even guest instructors come in to NYU that are in a wheelchair, and they're choosing to dance and move their upper body and explore their artistry or any type of disability that you may have. And so I think that in itself should inspire all of us all of the time to just try it, right? To just try it, have a good time, get out of our heads. And that's what movement should be about. It's not about perfection, right? It's disfrútatelo, baila, listen to the music, create your own dance moves, right? Let people judge you, and remove that judgment of yourself, because it's not, it's not actually there, okay? It's just a moment for you to celebrate yourself.
I love that. I know I said that was the last question, but you just said something that sparked something else in me, and I think it's an important conversation to have, which is body image and body positivity in the dance industry. Why am I bringing this up? Latinas, we are generally speaking, and for the most part, curvy. We see a lot of traditional Eurocentric standards, when it comes to ballet or other forms of dance that may have rippled into other aspects of the industry. So I'm curious to know what your personal experience with this topic is, and then also how you've managed it and how you've handled it, and also what you tell others about that. Similarly to what you were saying of be comfortable in your own body. It's about movement at the end of the day. Yep. Talk about that to close us out.
Yeah. Nosotros, we're all beautiful in our own way, right? We're all beautiful in our own way. And all bodies are beautiful bodies, right? That's something that is so true in the Ailey institution. And I grew up hearing those words from Judith Jamison, Mr. Ailey, all of the instructors that I had there, that if you're able to move your body, right, that is already a blessing. That doesn't take away from the fact that you have to do all these things, right? You have to have good nutrition. You have to exercise in order to complement the way that you train your body, right? Finding that balance for you. But ultimately, that's what it should be about. Finding the balance for yourself. And I think if I could encourage more young girls to do that, to not compare themselves to others, especially in this era of social media that, of course, like as we all know, is almost like a highlight reel, or it has
filters.
Filters. And it has also shifted the way that the dance community works as well, right? In any aspect, whether that's competition, ballet, modern, Afro-Latin dance techniques, it has shifted that. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? I'm a big fan of understanding that things should evolve. Lo que no evoluciona, se muere, right? So things need to continue to evolve in order to stay alive. But with that being said, focus on you and focus on what makes you feel good. Focus on how you would like to see yourself, right? Even if those answers are difficult, those are the answers that we need to search for. Y si lo puedo dejar con algo, que sea eso. Que tu competencia sea tú mismo. Yeah, that your own competition is just yourself, and that these ideas of what a dancer is supposed to look like, that we understand that those are things that were said hundreds of years ago, and they were incorrect then just as they are incorrect now, and that just highlighting how one specific body is supposed to look in order to be considered a dancer, or dancing one specific dance technique is considered, all of those things are lies, right? I grew up hearing ballet is the foundation of all dance techniques.
I did too, actually.
And it wasn't until I went to NYU and got my master's that my professors were like, that is a lie. That's a lie, because someone that grew up dancing hip hop technique or cumbia or merengue or what's another, like formally, right, tap, just because you didn't train in ballet doesn't mean that you're not a professional in that field. Of course, it makes you stronger. And of course, it adds to the way you move your body. It completely changes your mentality. I love ballet. It was one of my favorite techniques to train in. However, it is not true that ballet is the foundation of all dance techniques. That is incorrect, because you can be a professional West African dancer and have never trained in ballet, right? So just that shift of, just because something was taught to us or passed down for many generations doesn't mean that it needs to stay that way once we understand that that is incorrect, right? Or that's not how we want to see it.
Yeah. And we can be the change. You know, we can, como dijiste antes, put nuestro granito de arena to make things different. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your candor, for your vulnerability and sharing your story. Qué orgullo having here with me in this chair. I'm excited for all the things that you teased at and many, many more. Estás en tu casa. Cuentas con mi apoyo siempre. Thank you again for your time.
Muchas gracias. Un placer.
And thank you all for listening and watching. Until next time.